Hello, I am Polito and I'm going to present you Microdown, a clean and extensible markup language to support Pharo documentation. This work was done by Ducasse, Dargaud, and myself in the context of the Pillar project. So what is the Pillar project? The Pillar is a text edition toolchain whose original goals are to produce books and static websites from some markup language. So originally we started using the PR markup language. That was the one used by the PR CMS. And from that, actually, we now have a lot of books that are written in that markup language and that are managed by our toolchain. So you will see those books in square brackets associates in the website that is linked there. So we wanted to evolve Pillar with a couple of new goals. First, we wanted to have a better integration with external tools, text editor, websites, external applications, and we wanted to have in-image documentation. So the first thing that popped up in our minds was, why not using Markdown? Markdown is a pretty well-known markup language that is actually supported very well by a lot of text editors and websites and applications. So we started taking a look at that. Why Markdown, people may ask. First, Markdown is a kind of de facto standard. So it's not a standard per se, but a lot of people use it. So it is very well known and very used. So that gives us a couple of benefits. First, it gives us a low entry barrier. So people that wanted, for example, to participate or contribute to Pillar or to our books, they shouldn't need to learn a new markup language if they were going to use Markdown, for example. Another thing is that Markdown is used, for example, for project documentation, for example, in GitHub README files or in wikis. They are used, for example, in Slack, Discord, or Stack Overflow for user discussions and chats. They are also used in Jekyll for static website generation. Also, another thing that actually was a bit noisy for us was, if you take a look at the screenshot in the lower right part of the screen, that is the README file of the Pillar project, which is written in Markdown. So if we were writing our README file in Pillar, it wouldn't be rendered like that, actually. So because GitHub doesn't support rendering Pillar files. So this was kind of the benefits that we saw by looking at Markdown. So the problem with this is that Markdown, there's no single standard for Markdown. There are many standards for Markdown. Actually, each tool has a different variant. For example, if you go to this website, markdownguide.org/tools, you will see that there are a lot of tools that use Markdown, which actually is one of the benefits of using it. But each of these tools, they don't support the same set of features. So some of them, probably most of them, will actually agree on a couple of features, which we are going to call a subset of Markdown. But also a lot of them will have their own extensions to it. And not all of them will support the full set of features of, for example, Common Mark, which is a pretty well-known Markdown implementation. So taking this into account, the question is not anymore, do we use Markdown or not? Is what version should we use if we use it? Another problem to put in perspective is that Markdown doesn't have proper book support. So it doesn't have explicit anchors or figures or code references. So it has figures, it doesn't have figure references. It doesn't have captions for figures, and it's not extensible. We cannot add new elements into Markdown documents, for example. So this was kind of a showstopper for us, because if we cannot express books with this, it is actually not useful for us. And if it is not extensible, we cannot add our own support for books. So we decided instead of taking one of the existing Markdown implementations, we decided to create our own, that we are going to call Microdown. Microdown is a clean and extensible markup language that is based on three main ideas. First, it is a Markdown subset. It is a clean and non-ambiguous subset of Markdown. The idea is that every document that is written in this subset will be supported by both Microdown and by Markdown. So it gives us Microdown to Markdown compatibility. It also is extensible in the sense that we added some extensions to it, but also users can define their own extensions. This extension support was originally designed for books, but actually users can add their own extensions for other kind of things. We are going to see that in a couple of moments. And the third point of our implementation is that it has a robust parser that tolerates non-supported syntaxes. So for example, imagine that we take a random Markdown document that is in the wild, in the internet. Our Microdown parser should be able to take it and parse it and produce some output with some sense. The idea of our parser is that it will parse correctly everything that is supported by it, but everything that is not supported will be just printed as normal text. So it has a kind of a fallback mechanism. So our Markdown compatible subset is kind of made out of the most common elements that are used in Markdown. So Microdown supports horizontal lines, headers, code blocks, order lists, unordered lists, links, figures, also block quotes, tables, bolds, italics, and so on. And all of these, they have the same syntax as in Markdown. This means all the documents that are written using this syntax will work in both Markdown and Microdown. Moreover, we have designed a couple of extensions to it. Our mantra here was that we wanted to have as few syntactic extensions as possible, because syntactic extensions meant adding complexity to the parser, and also that we had to explain people new syntactic features. So we try to reduce that set of extensions to the bare minimum. Some of the extensions that we support are, for example, comments. Comments are preceded by percentage sign, and they will be, all the commented text will be ignored by the Microdown parser. Then we have anchors to tag titles and other elements so we can then reference them. We can also interpret the parameters, the arguments of the URLs in figures, so we can add, for example, labels to them or sizes that our Microdown parser will take into account when producing its output. And then we have extensible annotations that allow us to have a common extension mechanism, a general extension mechanism, that users can redefine. So for example, here we see a footnote annotation. So the footnote annotation is identified by a markup like a less than and bigger than markup with question marks. Then the annotation has a name followed by pipe and then the arguments of it. The idea is that on one side in the document people write the annotations with the corresponding arguments that they want, and then we can extend the pillar toolchain with annotation processors that will take each annotation and transform it in some way. The main idea behind this is that if there is an annotation that doesn't have its corresponding processor, it will just be ignored and then your document will still be working. Besides this, there's also inline math because it's something that is pretty common in our books. So we kept it as special syntactic elements. The third point in the Microdown design is its parser. So our parser is inspired by the common marks specification. The idea of this parser is that it's a line-based parser. It will read line by line, and from the lines it will actually create blocks or blocks of elements that will be composed by inline elements. So, for example, a block element is a paragraph, a block quote, a list, because it's composed by many different lines. And an inline element is an element that is inside the line, like for example a bold or an italics. Blocks can be also inside other blocks, forming a kind of a tree. And the parser works as follows. So it will read line by line. Every time that it reads a line with an opener, it will create a new block in the tree, and it will keep a kind of stack. So it will always have a current block. Then, when it reads another line, it will check if the current block accepts the line or not. If the block accepts the line, then the line is inserted in the block. Otherwise, the block is closed, and then we'll retry the operation with the parent of this block. We do this recursively until we arrive to the root of the document. If none of the blocks in the stack of blocks manage the current line, then that line is as verbatim text in the document. So this helps us actually with reading non-supported features of Markdown into Microdown in a clean way. We are already using this Microdown support for the rendering of classes and packages and package comments in Pharo. So if you go to Pharo 9 in the browser, you will find that comments are now rendered using Microdown. You can switch to an edition mode that will give you the Microdown text to edit. The core idea behind this support is twofold. First, we want to have nice comments to motivate people to write better comments. And then the second point of this is that now comments, they don't only support text, but they also support more richer elements like pictures or links that actually can enhance the navigation inside the image. Like we can have class links and package links and so on. Based on this support, we also have built comment templates. For example, here I'm showing you templates for how the templates for test cases and baselines work. When you write a class comment for a test case, then that comment will be rendered as a description of the class, but also the automatic render will show the list of all the tests that exist in that class, and all the tests will actually have a link to the method of that test. So, and all that is created automatically by the template. In the example of the baselines, what we have is that actually when you write a class comment for baseline, then that comment is shown as a description of the baseline, but also we are listing the dependencies of the baseline in the example. So, what is the current roadmap of Microdown? First, our current focus is on the documentation of Pharo with the comment support. We are starting working on books and slides, so that will be ready soon. We are extending the pillar toolchain to be able to process Microdown files, and soon we want to start working also in Iceberg integration to read Markdown files. And maybe you have some ideas that you want to share with us. We are really glad to hear them. If you want to know a bit more, check the article. There are template customizations, Microdown ISTs, parser details. So check it out and give us some feedback. So I presented you Microdown, a clean and extensible markup language to support Pharo documentation. So it is a clean and neat subset of Markdown with a robust parser and book extensions. And it has support for comments in the Pharo IDE, and soon we will have book support and Iceberg integration. Thank you very much for hearing me out. I hope you enjoyed the presentation.